In 2024, it's pretty cheap to get into gaming compared to 2020. Now, you might think like, what are you talking about? Everything's so expensive now. Just look at the secondhand market. I'm just gonna flash some deals I found on eBay. All of the GPUs you see in these screenshots outperform the GTX1650, which is what you're gonna see benchmarked in this video. But anyways, that's not really what this video is about. I wanted to do a direct GPU comparison in Roblox because I don't think anyone's really done that before. So I have a GTX 1650 and a 2070 Super. I put them both in my computer, the exact same one, same RAM, same CPU, same everything, and I played 9 different games. I did not record while doing this. I only recorded my numbers, and unfortunately, we don't have 1% lows, we have 99% averages because Roblox has patched Riva Statistics Tuner and MSI Afterburner just out of existence. So I had to desperately search for a workaround to get benchmark numbers. But I did get some, and they are accurate. If a game had different maps, I got the same map every time, and every test was recorded for 5 minutes, except for Arsenal, because Arsenal matches don't last for 5 minutes. Basically, I put a huge emphasis on consistency every time I could. But at the end of the day, it is Roblox. So yeah, pinch of salt, grain of salt, boulder. Here are the specs of the test rig. All benchmarks were done at 1080p with the FPS unlocker linked in the description. And let's go. So I picked Doors because it's a single player game and it seems pretty consistent. Anyways, let me explain the chart to you. So the first two numbers you see on the left, the light purple and the dark purple, those are the 2070 Super numbers. The higher one is the average and the lower one is the 99% average. Next to that, you have the 1650 average and 99% average, and on the right side of the screen you have the GPU usage for both GPUs. This is going to be a trend throughout the entire thing, but the lower GPU usage one is going to be the 2070 Super, and the higher one is going to be the 1650. So in Doors, the 2070 Super averaged 226 FPS with a 99% average of 172, and the GTX 1650 averaged 139 FPS with a 99% average of 120. The GPU usage on the 2070 Super was only 59%, and the GPU usage on the 1650 was 98%. So right off the bat, the idea that the GPU does not matter for Roblox has already been disproven. There's a clear difference in performance that's quite major, and the 1650 is being maxed out. Despite that, the performance was still really good on the 1650. Work at a pizza place was just included as a joke, but it actually gave us some interesting data. The idea that the GPU doesn't matter probably comes from games like this. We see that the 2070 Super had an average FPS of 242 with the 99% average of 178, and the 1650 had a similar 220 FPS average with a 99% average of 162. Now, the GTX 1650 was certainly working harder for this average, clocking in at 88% average instead of the 39% average of the 2070 Super, but overall there wasn't a big difference, and both are very playable frame rates, way more than you need for this game. The next game I included was Centaura. It has a lot of visual effects and there's just a lot of stuff happening. Also, the server count's pretty large. For this test, I chose the map with the battleship off the shore shooting stuff. I'm not a lore expert, dude. The one where the ship shoots a barrage at you and there's like armored cars. That one. I did that same map both times, 5 minutes. Anyways, the 2070 Super scored an average of 121 FPS with a 99% average of 75 FPS. The 1650 had an average of 82 FPS with a 99% average of 68. Not only is there a discrepancy in these numbers between the two GPUs, but the 1650 is actually maxed out, just like it was in Doors. The 1650 is more than good enough for this at 1080p, and a trend you'll see in these benchmarks is that the 2070 Super is just not being utilized properly. Up next we have Phantom Forces Labs. I chose Phantom Forces Labs over the regular Phantom Forces for consistency's sake. When you die in Phantom Forces, you get sent to the menu and your FPS spikes to like 500, so if you died more times playing with the 1650 than the 2070 Super, you might have a higher average with the 1650. So in Phantom Forces Labs, the 2070 Super had an average FPS of 163, and a 99% average of 121. The 1650 scored an average of 150 with a 99% average of 113. Now, the GPU usage was quite low even on the 1650. I had one theory, but it was completely ruined by another game on this list, but we'll get into that later. Frontlines, this is the game that Roblox will look like in 2012, so obviously I had to put it on here. The 2070 Super averaged 114 FPS with a 99% average of 84, and the 1650 scored an average of 95 FPS with a 99% average of 69. Nice. The GPU usage wasn't maxed out in the 1650 at 88%, and obviously it was nowhere near maxed out in the 2070 Super at only 43%. Something interesting I noticed about this game and other games is that when you go into a dark area, the GPU usage just plummets. Maybe someone will understand that, I don't. Yep. Noobs in Combat blows my theories out of the water in terms of what's happening with PF Labs, because in my little pea-brain, this is like kind of similar to PF Labs in terms of like its construction. There's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes, but the actual base plate itself is simple. However, unlike in PF Labs, the GTX1650 Super is nearly maxed out in Noobs in Combat, and the FPS is way higher on both GPUs. The 2070 Super basically matched its utilization that it had indoors at 58%. Anyways, the average FPS for the 2070 Super was 435, with a 99% average of 280, and for the 1650 it was 275, with a 99% average of 230. The GPU usage on both of these was quite high, at 58% for the 2070 Super and 95% for the 1650. For some reason in this game, your GPU just decides to go all out. I don't understand, because it doesn't do this in PF Labs, so some kind of wibbly-wobbly ROBLOX spaghetti stuff is happening. Up next we have Arsenal, which is kind of like a combination of what happened with PF Labs as well as work at a pizza place. The GPU usage is low, and the FPS between the two GPUs is more or less the same. The 2070 Super scored an average of 198 FPS with a 99% average of 120, and the 1650 scored an average of 190 FPS with a 99% average actually higher than the 2070 Supers at 122. The GPU usage was higher on the 1650 at 76%, but that's still low compared to what it was in some other games. And again, the 2070 Super is just not being utilized properly. Now this game is actually kind of interesting because I looked up ROBLOX benchmarks and I actually found one. This is like, it's so cool. It's like a really detailed map. It looks like a benchmark. It looks like those benchmarks you see in benchmark videos. There's just so much stuff happening and there's some scripted events with aliens showing up. It's just really cool. It's also really laggy. Anyways, the 2070 Super scored an average of 56 FPS with a 99% average of 43, and the 1650 scored an average of 43 FPS with a 99% average of 35. The 1650's GPU usage was quite high at 93%, and again, we don't even need to talk about the 2070's GPU usage. Go ahead and try this game if you haven't. Everything will be linked in the description. And finally, we have our own in-house benchmark, CringeMark by Riftic. This one is just weird. We discovered something wrong with ROBLOX. Essentially, once things start happening and there's like complex physics interactions and it's laggy, all of your hardware gives up. Your CPU, your GPU, everything. It just gives up, and I don't know what's rendering these frames, but it's not your hardware, mostly. I mean, as you can see by the FPS, like your computer just gets confused and it goes to sleep. Feel free to try it and see what happens to you. I'm not even sure if it's worth including these results. If you want to get CringeMark, you can install it now. The link's in the description. So what can we make of this? I think we all knew this, but there's something wrong with ROBLOX. Depending on what's happening, it just doesn't use your hardware. But in terms of like an ideal computer for ROBLOX, in terms of price to performance, how much do you really need? Something around the 1650 or maybe a little bit above it seems ideal. You know, like those deals I showed at the beginning, the RX580, the 1060, 1650 Super, RX 5500, you know, if you could find those at a good price, as well as really any CPU made in the last 5 years, you're good. You know, you don't even need that, but if you want something that's good enough for outside of ROBLOX as well, you might as well, right? In the future, I might make a video on like an ideal PC for ROBLOX in terms of price to performance. I feel like that'd be kind of fun to do. I'll put all the statistics in the description so you can look at it without having to scroll through the video. And I actually just upgraded my CPU from a 9700K to a 7700X. And I'm considering redoing this, but as a CPU test to see if it really matters. But these are both high-end, not really. The 9700K is not a high-end part, but it's an 8-core, and to the average consumer, it would probably seem high-end, even though it's not. So comparing these two CPUs might seem redundant, but if I see an actual difference, I'll go ahead and make the video. Anyways, like and subscribe. Asking for games to be benchmarked, as you can see by this video, is just pointless. Like, yeah, we get different results, and some of them are consistent, but a lot of them aren't. Yeah. If you have something similar to a 1650 or better, ROBLOX is the game for you. See ya.